Dozing in deck chair, through half-closed eyes, I watched the cricket, knowing the sporting press would say, a perfect wicket. Ground, through heat hail, a wary bat on ball from it, quell its bound. Sunburned looked, though urgent, scarce alive, swooped like swallows of a dream on skimming fly, the hard-hit drive. Beyond the score box, through the trees, gleamed Severn, blue and wide, where oarsmen feathered with polished ease and passed in gentle glide. The backcloth setting off the setting, Peter's Cathedral soared, rich of shade and fine of fretting, like cut and painted board. To the cathedral, close for shelter, huddled houses bent and slim, some tall, some short, all helter-skelter, like a skyline drawn for grim. This the fanciful engraver might in his creative dream have seen, here framed by summer's glaring light, grey stone majestic over green. Closer, the bowler's arm swept down, the ball swung, pitched and darted, stump and bail flashed and flew, the batsman pensively departed. Like rattle of dry seeds in pods, the warm crowd faintly clapped. The boys who came to watch their gods, the tired old men who napped. The members sat in their strong deck chairs and sometimes glanced at the play. They smoked and talked of stocks and shares, and the bar stayed open all day.
I have never been interested in sport as such. I'm not appealed to by the excitement or speculation of games. Except during Lancashire and Yorkshire matches of cricket, I have not cared about wins or losses. I'd rather see one of my best off-breaks hit to the boundary than bowl a man out with a long hop. My love of cricket has little to do with the sportsman's instincts. The great game must have pageantry about it and bring forth variety of a man's nature, especially humour and national character. The crowd must take it to heart and get upset and brood during the week upon its ups and downs. It must at times lay heavily upon the minds of the people and render them gloomy. Years ago, Lancashire defeated Yorkshire in a cricket match at Leeds, a victory by some 20 runs. On the third morning, Yorkshire had wanted a mere 50 to win with all their wickets to fall. During an epic August bank holiday, Lancashire had collapsed in a second innings, all out just before the close of play. Next day, hardly anybody visited the ground, except those necessary to go through the formalities attendant upon obtaining the correct statistics of a 10 wickets victory for Yorkshire. The players, the scorers, the umpires, the press, with perhaps a handful of members as witnesses, and a few cloth caps with naught else to do. And anyway, bars will be open while Sutcliffe and Holmes are knocking off runs. Gentle rain in the night had made the turf capricious, and before we knew what was happening, the Yorkshire innings fell into rack and ruin. When the last batsman was overwhelmed and Lancashire had really and truly won the match, I rushed from the ground, eager to carry the good news back to Manchester. I leapt on a tram and sat down inside, and the guard came with his tickets. What's they won by? Lost any wickets getting them? I told him that Lancashire, not Yorkshire, were the victors. He expressed some impatience. I'm talking about cricket, he said, presumably under the impression I'd come straight from a polo match or archery tournament. I repeated to him the dreadful truth, and he suspended business at once. He didn't give me a ticket, but turned his back on me and walked from the almost empty tram, conveyed the news to a trolley boy who relayed it to the driver. The tram proceeded to travel some 3 miles into Leeds by its own volition. When I reached the railway station, I was a little in advance of the departure of the train to Manchester, so I entered a refreshment room and sat down to a little table. Shortly afterwards, a man sat down next to me, cap and muffler, and spoke in the speech of Lacerdyke. "Eh, dear," he said, "who'd have thought it? Fancy Yorkshire cracking up like that. I'd never have thought it." There was no anger in his voice, no tone of abuse directed at the faltering Yorkshire 11. There was only the accent of sorrow. "Eh, dear," he repeated, "it's a woman." He eyed me carefully, then said, "Well, that doesn't seem to be taking this very much to heart." And I was obliged to explain to him that as I came from Lancashire and Manchester, born and bred there, I couldn't be expected to take it to heart exactly. He looked at me from a different angle. "So that from Lancashire out there? Eh, dear. And that's from Lancashire." Yes, from Lancashire. A slight pause. "And thou's come all the way from Manchester to watch match, Aster?" "Yes, that's it," I answered. "And thou's going back to Manchester by 2:20 train, eh?" Yes, I told him I was indeed returning to my native city by the 2:20 train. After another short spell of meditation, he said, "They'll be feeling very pleased with this, won't they?" "Naturally," I replied, taking care not to look too triumphant. "Eh, by God, fancy Yorkshire cracking like that. Aye, they'll be feeling very pleased with this, I shouldn't wonder." And he repeated the question, "And thou's going back to Manchester by 2:20 train, aren't they?" Feeling now a little access of irritation, I answered, yes, straight back. "Well," he said, without the slightest heat, "I hopes the drops down dead before they gets there." If a game doesn't exhibit elemental character and loosen springs of unself-conscious humour, I can find no use for it. I can remember happenings of cricket which seem to have been devised by a great comic muse who very much loved the English, especially the North English people. On a certain morning in another Lancashire and Yorkshire match at Old Trafford in 1939, the cricketer Mitchell arrived at the wicket early and stonewalled through the afternoon. In other and less passionate matches, Mitchell was not above a brilliant stroke or two, but he reserved himself especially for Old Trafford, when the crowd, many of them liberated at Whitsun from the pits and factories, had come out to take the air and enjoy themselves. In dead silence, everybody ached in resigned boredom. Maiden over followed maiden over, and Mitchell got lower and lower over his bat. 30 runs he made in 2 hours. Suddenly the stillness was broken by a voice, weary and outraged. "Every bloody year, every so-and-so year he comes here, this so-and-so Mitchell, and he spoils bank holiday, every so-and-so year." Silence again, disturbed only by the sullen and muffled bat of Mitchell. More maidens. The voice of a man in a hard bowler hat was raised again. "Every bloody year, every so-and-so year." Thus far he had addressed nobody in particular. It was an apostrophe to abstract reason and justice and toleration. Now he directed himself to the crowd around him. "Every so-and-so year he comes here. I said to my missus this morning, I'm going to Old Trafford, and what's more, that so-and-so Mitchell will stay all bloody day, that he will. Every so-and-so year he does it, and he'll do it again. That's what I said to my missus. And look at him. Here he's so-and-so bloody well is." Another descent into dreadful stillness. And now the man in the hard hat spoke to Mitchell personally. "Thee, Mitchell," he called out, "I'm talking to thee. Every so-and-so year there's been coming here spoiling bank holiday. Every bloody year. Well, listen to me, Mitchell. Aye, I'm talking to thee, and don't pretend I can't hear. Every so-and-so year there's been mucking up bank holiday here. But I'll tell thee something that doesn't know." He took a deep breath. "There's going to be a so-and-so war, me lad. So they won't bloody well be coming here next year. Good afternoon, and tell we ye." He gave Mitchell a last look and went home.
Middlesex, captained by P.F. Warner, who was now playing his last county match, had started the season of 1920, the first proper season since the First World War, very badly. At the end of July, they had to win, though they didn't know it, 9 matches running to secure the championship. 8 of these had been won when they met Surrey in their last match of the season. To my dying day, I shall never forget the tumultuous welcome the crowd gave me on going out to play my last innings for Middlesex at Lord's. I was cheered all the way to the wickets, cheering in which the Surrey 11 joined, and there was a big lump in my throat, and I could scarcely see when I took block. In 7.5 minutes, Stevens and myself scored 25 runs, running like rabbits between the wickets and taking all sorts of risks, even with such a fieldsman as Hobbs. At 3:40 I closed the innings. Surrey were thus left with 244 runs to make in 3 hours. Would they get them? Should we get them out? It was exactly a minute to 4 o'clock when Durston from the nursery end bowled the first ball to Hobbs, Haig being the other bowler. After 2 or 3 overs, the bowlers changed ends, and at 22 Hobbs was had at second slip, the ball bounding off Hendren's hands to Lee. Howell played very well, but he was beautifully stumped at 62, and Shepherd joined Sandham. 70, 80, 90, 100, 110 went up, but at 120 Shepherd fell to a beautiful catch by Hendren, who had to judge a big high drive, backing the while with the screen not 10 yards behind him. The time was now 5:27, so that Surrey had at this point 124 runs to make with a little more than an hour and a half to go. Stevens had been given a rest after bowling for 25 minutes, but a quarter of an hour later he was back again at the nursery end, and it was off his bowling that Hendren made the catch. Fender's appearance was the signal for a prolonged burst of applause from the Surrey partisans, but after nearly cutting my right hand off at point with a terrific square cut, he was clean bowled, hitting across a straight, well-pitched-up ball, something between a Yorker and a half-volley of Durston's. 122 for 4, last man won. Peach is the next batsman, and 10 minutes later Hearn relieves Durston at the pavilion end. At 5:47, Stevens clean bowls Peach with a beautiful ball, which pitches on the leg stump and hits the top of the off, and to which the batsman played forward. 143 for 5, last man 11. At 4 minutes to 6, Sandham got out. Hearn bowled him a full pitch, which he hit fairly hard straight back to the bowler, who clutched it eagerly. 155 for 6, last man 68. Surrey now need 85 to win, 64 minutes to go and 4 wickets to fall. Hitch was missed by Hendren of all people at deep square leg from a low hard hit, but one which Patsy would accept 9 times out of 10. A groan goes up all round the ground, but 5 minutes later a fine length googly of Hearn's has duck at LBW, and in the next over another googly, this time from Stevens, which it would have taken a Ranji or a Fry to stop, clean bowls Hitch, and away he walks, amidst terrific Middlesex shouts this time. 168 for 8, last man 6. Time 6 minutes past 6. Ray attempts a rustic swipe at a leg break of Hearn's and is bowled, and in comes Rushby, smiling and unmoved, at the last hope with Strudwick at the other end of Surrey. A ball of Stevens beats Rushby and the wicket-keeper and goes for 4 byes, and Strudwick makes a 2 here, a single there, while Rushby shows no signs whatever of trepidation. It is now Strudwick's turn to face Stevens, and with the 4th ball of his 14th over, that splendid young cricketer sends down another fine googly, and at 20 minutes past 6, Middlesex had won the championship. As long as I live, I shall hear the yell of delight and the thud of thousands of feet rushing across the ground. From every side they swarmed, and I was tackled just above the ankles, the right place to tackle, they used to tell us at rugby, by a fine big fellow, and deposited far up the pavilion steps, borne by the joyous crowd. What my feelings were, no words of mine could describe.
It started on the home meadow soon after the departure of Father Christmas and the arrival of the Blue-Nosed brothers, Frost and Snow. At about the same time, the 3rd test was being played at Melbourne. That match had an end, merciful, unexpected, agonising, according to opinion's choice, but inevitable. Our own test had no end. There was a local prejudice against stopping anything once it has started, whether it is cricket, dancing, or go-kart touched off at the top of a hill. But it had a sort of middle, and it was around then that I joined it. It was a single wicket match between England and Australia, but you could be run out at either end, or at both, one after the other. The countries were represented by both sexes, ages ranged from 4 to 14. From deep, square-legged Carmichael to cover, who sometimes made snowballs or was taken away for an hour's siesta, to roving Longstop, who made nothing but a few unheeded appeals and took his sleep standing up. There were also 2 dogs, a gentleman and a player, and lest it should be thought that I cast some slur on their social status, it may be explained that the gentleman just watched, but the player joined in. This test had reached its 3rd or 4th afternoon. No one was caring which. It was timeless, like love and London clocks and the garden of the Hesperides. One day they would grow up and discover bunions and overdrafts and the balls of control. But by a purely personal arrangement, the England captain was batting for Australia, a guest artist. He was accepted like Monday morning, and he said he had made 74. At 80 he retired, because he wanted a bowl at his young sister, whose desires for success had been sharpened by insults and a prolonged absence from the crease. The wicket-keeper, obsessed by the Victorian notion that ladies needed help, took guard for her. But she kicked him out of the way and was still acting the suffragette when she was bowled by a full pitcher on the middle stump. She said she wasn't ready. What woman ever was? And so she went on batting. After a week, the players knew no score but their own. The Australian captain claimed 694 in 23 innings and said that as he'd never really been out, his average was infinity. At times I was asked to umpire, at others to field just over there. On the last afternoon of the holidays, I was asked to bowl. Not on merit, but because the two best England bowlers had been whipped away to the dentist. Darkness was falling when I bowled a ball that pitched on a block of ice and started to return, in disgust, to its originator. The batsman, like Warren Bardsley on a famous occasion, came out to hit it. Twice he missed, the first time because he fell over, and the second because Point had meanwhile removed the ball and thrown it at the batsman's wicket, which it struck, then passed on to the back of the wicket-keeper's neck, who was arguing with Longstop. So ended that day's play, in chaos, darkness, and vulgar abuse. Dogs barked, the deep square leg was taken off the bed, and 3 times round the house the gong was sounded for tea.
Nobody can conceive the misery I underwent during the summer of 1953 before the Ashes were safe. During the Lord's Test, I gave up cricket. Not merely playing cricket, but watching, listening to, arguing about, and agonising over cricket. The time was 6:30 p.m. on Monday, 29th of June, 1953. I had just seen England go in to start the task of making 343 in the 4th innings on a warm pitch. The hideously incredible score was 20 for 3, and the victims were Hutton, the old master, Graveney, the young master, and Kenyon, the only man to score a century in a county match against the Australians that season. I could bear no more. Why, after all that, I should find myself next morning in St John's Wood Road is a question for a psychiatrist. I wouldn't believe a word he said anyway. It may have been the criminal returning to the scene of the crime. It may have been an exceptionally morbid streak of my nature. At any rate, I found myself in my usual place in front of the tavern, and there beside me was Albert Osmotherley. Albert is one of the far too many Yorkshiremen who infest Lords. He glared at me. Thought you were never coming back. I thought you weren't, I said. He shrugged his shoulders, frowned across at the Father Time scoreboard, 20 for 3, and delivered judgment. They'll never get them, he said. This was an understatement of the position. The umpires came out, the fieldsmen came out, the batsmen, Compton and Watson, came out. It seemed almost strange that the clergyman didn't meet them at the pavilion gate. I'll give them till lunchtime, said Albert, as though he were making a wildly generous offer. Even from the beginning, play was quiet, with all the pensive tranquility of obsequies at which the hearse had not yet turned up. Suddenly, Compton forgot he was at a funeral and hit 3 fours. When I clapped, Albert looked at me disapprovingly. At lunch, the score, against all probabilities, was 114 for 4. At least, I said, they've lasted till now. You wait, muttered Albert, as though he had a couple of earthquakes up his sleeve. I don't know what time hope began to revive like a numb gum coming out of a local anaesthetic. Slowly it dawned on me. Come rope, come rack, 7 men still lived with bats in their hands. Why should not at least some of them survive? Albert looked shocked when I put this to him. You must be daft, he said. There was something almost uncanny in the way Watson and Bailey supported my daftness. Watson, fair, trim and cool, took the good balls in the middle of the bat and pulled the short ones with force and velocity away to leg. Bailey, with consistent courage, got in the way of the ball, mostly with the bat, sometimes with the pad, and sometimes painfully with his fingers. But if he observed subconsciously, this hurts me more than it hurts you, it gave the bowlers no comfort. The bowlers toiled and spun, Lindwall with controlled fury, Johnson with force and guile, Miller with windmill whirlings, Benno with quickish tweakers, and Ring with waspish cunning, yet in vain. With easy avenging fury that had torn England to tatters the evening before. When Watson and Bailey went in for tea at 183 for 4, I would willingly have subscribed to a fund for providing both of them with gold cups and platinum saucers. As hope gleamed, terrors revived. The crowd showed a slight tendency to gasp and groan, and to sigh in relief when the ball was safe, untouched in the wicket-keeper's gloves. I died 1,000 deaths, and wouldn't have missed one of them. It was 10-6 when the heroic pair looked as though they would remain forever in their heroic attitudes. But Watson suddenly became mortal. Touched one to the slips, and as fate so often wills, his partner departed soon after. The match was back in the melting pot, and hearts were in the mouths again. 6:10, 6:15, 6:25 6. I shut my eyes. Brown was out. All around me, people were frenziedly counting how many balls there were to come. Johnny Wardle came along. If he had a care in the world, he certainly didn't show it. 1, 2, 3. Wardle, a born survivor, survived. The umpires took off the bail. Who dies if England lives? The crowd went mad. Albert flung his hat in the air and leapt and met it in the first steps of a wild Zulu war dance. I knew they'd do it, he panted, but it doesn't do to speak too soon.
I know that you may not want to become a Test cricketer, and I don't blame you. There are so many objections to top cricket. Let's consider just a few. First, you may not have the competitive instinct. You may not give a damn if Australia win 33 Test matches on end, or if England are all out for naught at Karachi. Secondly, you may suffer from a trauma, not only of the soul, but of the shins, owing to half holidays at school when you stood helplessly at mid-on, echoing with leg hits like 1,000 woodpeckers, and longing to be catching butterflies, poaching the woods of some pompous and adjacent old ass. Again, you may, as years and wisdom increase, be appalled by the sheer monotony of cricket. Was it not Groucho Marx who, when watching his first match of cricket at Lord's, remarked to his companion and guide, "But say, when's the game itself gonna begin?" You may also be horrified by cricket's seriousness. It's possible to watch several dozen Test and county matches without seeing any player smile, let alone laugh. Indeed, for a spectator to laugh when an England batsman is bowled out for naught is rather like showing merriment in church. If anything, it's worse, because the religion of cricket is more widespread. If you feel like laughing, stay away from top cricket. Be content with your agnosticism. Without doubt, the severest strain is taken by the captain of a touring team. Before he leaves these shores, he is pretty certain to be reminded by some bald old high-up that he is now an ambassador in charge of 15 or 16 other ambassadors, a sort of diplomatic missionary athlete. He'll have to make, and appear to listen to, far too many speeches. When questioned about the decisions of umpires, he'll have to show a tact beyond his years and almost beyond his powers. Buoyantly, he may ride all these breakers, but he still has to cope with the press. It must be remembered that the dear old days have gone when perhaps 10 or a dozen reporters described the Test matches and confined their remarks almost entirely to the cricket. Prestige and politics had not then turned a sport into a business. But today, the commentators on newspapers, radio, and television outnumber the two teams together by about 5 to 1. Of these, at least half are under instructions to be far more interested in what happens off the field than on it. Personalities, and what should be the private affairs of Test cricketers, have now, to an increasing extent, ousted cricket as the subject matter of reports. Again, if you are of a touchy disposition, and most Test cricketers are, you will not relish the extremes of praise and blame showered upon you by newspaper writers who never scored double figures even in the backyard, and were anyhow probably playing golf or drinking while you were batting or bowling for your country. You rise from the ruck and do something notable in a Test with bat or ball. You are pounced on and made a hero by the Daily Howl. But you're even more valuable as a cause for another pounce, by the Daily Howl, on the selectors. What were these besotted fuddlers doing to ignore you before? Isn't it time that the whole question of selectors was probed? Who are they, anyhow? Well, they are mostly former England cricketers, and their chairman is probably a former England captain. Ah, yes. But they were appointed by the Marylebone Cricket Club. What right has a private club to select an international team? Does not all this sort of thing reek of favouritism behind closed doors, of outmoded establishment, nay, even of class consciousness? Meanwhile, you have played in another test match, scored 0 and 3 run out, and missed 2 vital catches. Once more, you are pounced on by the Daily Howl. Obviously, you lack the test match temperament. You are all right playing for Loamshire in front of 3 men and a dog, but you are not England stuff. What then were the selectors, those permanently besotted fuddlers, doing to choose you? Isn't it time the whole question of selectors was probed? Who are they, anyhow? Well, we won't go into all that again. You know who they are. But it doesn't matter anymore. You've been dropped. You won't play in any more test matches. So, start a sports shop. Or go on the stock exchange. Or best of all, join the Daily Howl. Sit in the press box and look wise while some professional journalist does your column for you. Then, when the time comes, write a book and call it How to Become a Test Cricketer.
Coaching boys the other day, recalling legs that legward stray, warily pleading that it mars the style if bats are scimitars, persuading bowlers that their length and rectitude are more than strength, however jovially applied if all it ends in is a whine. The father of some cricketer, a heavy man, approached, said, "Sir, to my boy, he's always caught it slip. It gives me one gigantic pip. Now, can you give me any reason why this should happen all the season, instead of intermittently as it occurs with you and me?" "Show me the boy," quoth I, "sir, please." Whereat Scorbutic, ill at ease, stole from behind his ample father a boy, obscured till now, or rather what might have passed for boy by chance, but for his cow-like countenance. Never in any town or rank saw I a face so wholly blank. No freckle, twinkle, nothing dimply. It was a facial Sahara, simply. "Put on those pads," his father said, as if conversing with the dead, "and show the gentleman the stroke concerning which I lately spoke." He donned them, filially resigned. I gave him guard to leg inclined. I bowled him long hops free from guile, full pitches you could hit a mile, half volleys straight, half volleys wide, swervers delicious for the glide. He never swerved nor lost his grip, but snicked the ruddy lot to slip. Strange wonders have there been in cricket. Once in a match I took a wicket, shot in a heel this evening shoe, a confidence atwixt me and you. Jones bowled a ball through Grace's beard, and Ranji only Lockwood feared. But never since the game began, since old men stood while young men ran, was such consummate batsmanship as to hole out each ball at slip. "Take off those pads," his father said, resuming converse with the dead. "You've shown the gentleman the stroke by which my heart and mother's broke. Good day, sir." And with footsteps slow, he took his tragedy in tow. The parent first, the portent after, leaving me deep in awe and laughter.
In the 11 months between the beginning of May 1924 and the end of March 1925, Maurice Tate, in his 30th year, placed himself among the really great bowlers of the modern or overarm age of bowling. F.R. Spoffles, Lohman, C. T.P. Turner, S.F. Barnes, Maurice Tate and Bill O'Reilly. There have been other outstanding bowlers, but for attack, for ability to defeat the best batsmen on unhelpful wickets, for bowling the virtually unplayable ball, these men must stand alone. Maurice Tate appeared to make the ball leave the ground faster in relation to its speed through the air than any other pace bowler in the history of the game. Great batsmen have said that he could be of medium pace through the air and positively fast off the pitch. Certainly at the start of an innings, it was impossible to play back to him. A batsman who tried to do so would find his stumps leaping before his bat was fully down. 1923 had been a great season for Tate, but in 1924 he was the greatest problem batsman had faced since Sidney Barnes. It was excitement to go to Brighton to watch him. At any moment he might whisk away the entire batting of a county in a burst of inspired bowling. He would take the end which enabled him to bowl into the wind and measure out his run, 7 full paces and a 4-foot jump, and there he made his mark. Then you saw the most perfect bowling action that theory or practice can conceive. 2 short walking steps falling into 6 accelerating running strides, and midway between the 5th and 6th, the body rocked easily back. The left arm was thrown up, the ball held in the back-slung right hand, so that at one point of the swing, the left hand pointed high forward, and there was a pure straight line from the fingers of the left hand diagonally across the body to the right hand. Then, with the final leap, came the full rhythmic swing of those heavy shoulders. He delivered at the highest point of his vertical swing and followed through with his hand seeming to press heavily into the air. The left foot, square, plunged into the ground just off the line of the stumps, so that in any appreciable spell he would dig a pit just where the batsman stood, and which might have to be filled in several times in the course of a single match. Tate's arm swept on after the delivery in a huge circle right round past his legs, and as he pulled away to the offside of the wicket, he had completed the finest bowling action of our time. The approach, delivery and follow-through fathered, concentrated and directed every fraction of their combined energy into the pace of the ball. There is no suggestion of strain or pressing in his action, and in his entire career, Maurice Tate never once bowled a no ball. At Brighton, on one occasion, he threw up a floater, which a violent wind carried away, and that was his only wide. That delivery apart, every ball he ever bowled was finely controlled and simultaneously impelled with immense ferocity. Because we have not his like among us today, it is difficult to convey the power of Maurice Tate's bowling for those 9 years from 1923 to 1932. His stamina was such that he bowled unwaveringly through the longest spells. Often he was bowling too well. When he was bowling at his best with the new ball, only the greatest were good enough even to edge him in the early stages of their innings. Most dangerous of all was his outswinger, which moved in at the line of the middle and off stumps, and then in the last yard moved away towards the slips. In the year 1924, he took more than a third of the wickets which fell while he was in the field for a fifth of the runs scored. There was not a great batsman in the country who did not fall to him, not a single county against which he played without having one of his great spells.
When I was a small boy, I wanted above all things to become a first-class cricketer. Given the chance of changing shoes with Ranjit Singh or Joe Chamberlain, with F.S. Jackson or George Meredith, with Tom Richardson or the Prince of Wales, I would not have hesitated for a moment. Flannels were the only wear. My great ambition was to play in a test match, score a double century, bowl Joe Darling for a duck, and catch the last Australian left-handed on the stroke of time, the ball being driven with such force that it sent me spinning round and round, like Mademoiselle Jenny at the Empire. Of course, I would play in county matches too. Surrey, good old Surrey, was my chosen team. And as I lay in bed at nights, I would imagine myself talking on equal terms with the giants of the Oval, with K.J. Key and Bobby Abel, and Tom Hayward and other Titanic comrades. Hello, Abel. Hello, Farjan. Ripping innings you played, Farjan. Oh, I don't know, Abel. I had a good deal of luck. Not at all. You batted first-rate, Farjan. Didn't he, Mr. Key?
He did indeed, Abel. Farjan, I shall put you in first next match.
And so gloriously on until I fell asleep to dream the dreams I could not control. I remember the day I discovered how to bowl leg breaks. You took the tennis ball between the middle finger and the third, and you give your fingers a flick and a look, a leg break. Not once, but half a dozen times. Joe, come into the garden. I can bowl leg breaks. Nonsense, I don't believe it. But I can. I swear it. Look, come and see. All right, I don't mind. You tried it. How sceptical he was as he stood bat in hand on the gravel path that was our pitch. But I was confident. I knew I could.
There, did you see it break? That didn't break. That hit a stone. It didn't hit on a stone, you know it didn't. All right, it broke if you like. It isn't if I like, it did break. You watch this time. I bowled again, the ball pitched straight, and it kept straight. Did that one break? From the other end? Well, of course it didn't. I didn't do it right, that's all. Now you'll see, I bowled a third time, a fourth, a fifth. It was no good. Somehow I lost the trick of it. I was furious. I flew at my brother with my fists, and he held me gently and firmly at bay. It did break the first time. Did it? Did it? Well, did it? Did it? I'll tell you it did. Well, you think it did, and I think it didn't, that's all. It didn't hit a stone. Look, let me go. It didn't hit on a stone. Oh, Briggs, oh, Brand, oh, Woodcock, oh, C.J. Cartwright. It's a long time ago, I know, but even now, I swear it struck no stone. Even now, I swear that with my own unaided fingers, I did make that first ball break.
Reflections on test matches and critics. It is an old English custom that a cricket team arriving from or departing overseas is given an official luncheon in London. Many celebrities are present, and inevitably some utterly misinformed patriot, like Mr. Kipling's jelly-bellied flag flapper, informs his rather bored and cynical audience that they are not so much cricketers as ambassadors, and that their visit will forge another link in the chain which binds the mother country to her colonies. Beautiful words, no doubt, and duly recorded by the press, who then go their respective ways and proceed to play merry hell. A careful analysis of this rather hysterical publicity which surrounds test matches leads one to the conclusion that far too many people are permitted to write about them. Not only are the regular and accredited writers on the game engaged, but they are reinforced by two other sections, the sensationalists and the very eminent cricketers. The former, rather like cheapjacks, are out to get a story somehow, and if they know nothing about cricket, what does that matter? They thrive on the "I am informed that Hammond put his tongue out at Leyland in the hotel lift" sort of thing. And under a large heading of revolting incident, proceed to write an article on team spirit and, of course, their own suggestions as to leadership and on the composition of the team. The eminent cricketers, on the other hand, know all about it. So much so that they definitely select the team and decide the policy. Certainly, with their experience, they ought to know, but as jockeys, who actually ride the horses, are said to be notoriously bad tipsters, I often wonder. But even then, cricketers turned pressmen, despite their satisfactory remuneration, have their worries. One of them, when asked how he managed to compose his masterpieces amid the bustle and noise of the press box, admitted that in order to be quite alone and unmolested, it was his custom to do his writing in the, it cost him a penny a time. But when all is said and done, the journalists, in whatever category they are, do at least get paid. What about the poor selectors who don't? They undertake responsibilities and worries which company directors drawing thousands a year would regard with horror, and like Pip, Squeak, and Wilfred, they must wonder what is going to happen next. How exactly the word scapegoat is defined in the dictionary, I don't know, but a test team selector can safely be added. Reflections on love and cricket. At a luncheon given by the Authors Club a few years ago in honor of D.R. Jardine, the chairman spoke words to this effect. Cricket has found little favor with authors as a setting for a novel because it is a subject into which it is practically impossible to introduce any love interest. There is a celebrated book called The Cricket on the Hearth, but unfortunately it has nothing to do with cricket. And if it had, the title is not a happy one, as it smacks too much of one of those dreadful parlour games which invariably end abruptly owing to Aunt Cassie's inability to refrain from cheating. It is therefore with a certain amount of pleasure that I am able to offer you here a few details about my forthcoming bestseller, Maiden Over. When they review it, Nomad and Pendragon will probably use some such description as primitive passion welling up from the depths like water from a wet wicket when the heavy roller is put on, which will be very mild indeed. And as this book will appear in serial form in this yearbook in 1937, 1938, 1939, and so on, order your copy for 1948 now, as it is in that year that the big moment arrives. This takes place in Swansea on an August bank holiday. The great West Walian metropolis is packed to overflowing, for not only are the unbeaten Australians forming the opposition, but the Glamorgan team for the first time are including their mystery fast bowler, Morgan Morgans. Although a native of Cumscut and of humble parentage, chapters 8, 9, and 10, so cleverly had the publicity been worked that little was known of him except for the fact, freely advertised, that before taking Setum alight, he had suffered from spots before the eyes, ruptured rhomboids, disinclination for female society, hidden constipation, and gym jams. Rumour had it that his bowling was of an almost incredible velocity, and for this reason, perhaps, among those who had squeezed themselves into the St. Helens ground was Lady Betty Belfoy, pronounced Beefy, herself pretty swift. The only daughter of His Grace, the Duke of Skewin and Splotlands, Lady Betty's face, chapter 2, hair, chapter 3, eyelashes, chapter 4, and skin, chapter 5, were familiar to all readers of the illustrated press, and the amount she ate and drank in the cause of sweet charity was immense. Why had she come? She kept asking herself. Could it be? However, let us get started. Chapter 1. 1. What fun I should be having if drawers were abolished, said Lady Betty, looking up from her paper. And Binge, the old family butler, dropped the cocktail tray with a crash. That's the second week running a drawer has spoilt my coupon, she continued. And Binge, ashamed of his unworthy thought, hastily stooped to hide his confusion and to pick up the tray.
England's second innings against the Australian 11 at Kennington Oval on Tuesday, August the 29th, 1882. Though wayward time be changeful of man's will, we have the game, we have the Oval still, and still the gasworks marks the gasworks end, and still our sun shines and the rains descend. Speak to me, Muse, and tell me of the game when Murdoch's great 11 overcame. Laurels were tensely lost and hardly won in that wild afternoon at Kennington, when more than 20,000 watchers stared and cheered and hoped and anguished and despaired. Tell of the day, how heavy rain had cleared to sunshine and mad wind as noontime neared, then showers, sometimes hail on strong blast cold, making a wicket good for men who bowled. Such was the day when England's side went in just before 4 with 85 to win. Grace and the captain Hornby led the way, Grace to face Spofforth in beginning play. Spofforth was bowling from the gasworks end, Garrett across. The opposites contend. Now the sharp fears came tugging at the heart as cunning strove with care and skill with art. Hornby and Grace, with 85 to win, watched for some balls, then made the runs begin. 10 had gone up when Hornby's wicket went, his off stump, from a ball that Spofforth sent. 1 for 15, and Barlow took his place. Barlow, our safest bat, came in with Grace. Barlow, the wonder, famed in song and story, the Red Rose County's well-remembered glory. The first ball Spofford sent him bowled him clean. 2 gone of England's surest for 15. But Grace alone was power manifest. Of all men there, he is remembered best, the great black-bearded doctor, watchful-eyed, and next to our queen, that vanished England's pride. Grace was still in, and Arlott joined him there. Slowly the scoring mounted from the pair to 20, 30, 40. And anon Garrett was taken off and Boyle put on, and Spofford changed to the pavilion end. 30 odd runs and 7 bats to spend. Surely a task so simple could be done. Arlott and Grace seemed settled and had won. 50 went up, and then a marvel came. Still something told by lovers of the game. Spofford sent down a ball that Arlott hit. No barest chance, it seemed, to mortal wit. Snicked high and wide it went. Yet, with one hand, Blackham just caught it and dissolved the stand. 3 gone for 51. Lucas joined Grace, 2 partners famed in many a case, but not, alas, for them, for 2 more runs, Grace was caught out at 53 for 4. Caught from a ball by Boyle, for Boyle had found all he could wish in that uncertain ground. Still, 32 to win with 6 to fall, Littleton joined and brought delight to all. Enchanting promise came, for runs were scored. Lucas and he put 60 on the board, and then the conflict quieted to grim. For master spirits shine when hopes are dim. Australia's best, all their best were there. Light, wicket, and themselves, all bad, beware. The field were all lithe leopards on the pounce. Each ball had a new break at every bounce. 12 deadly overs followed without score. Then came a run. Then deadly maidens more. Then Spofford shattered destinies of rest, and Littleton's mid-stump was scattered west. 5 gone for 66. But hope, still green, felt the last 5 would make the last 19. Had we not Steele and Studd and Morris Reed, 3 superb bats, how could we fail to speed? Here, Hornby, saving a reserve to win, remade the order of the going in, putting in Steele, not Studd, at 5th man gone, thinking that Studd might save us later on, if any later on might need a stay. A strain and anguish settled on the day as Steele came in. But Lucas cut a 4. Not 19 now, but only 15 more. Steele hit his first ball back to Spofford's hand. Then Morris Reed gave centre and took stand. Reed, Surrey's pride, whoever made hope thrill in doubtful games when things were going ill. If Reed could stay. But Spofford's second ball made the mid-stump of Surrey's pride to fall, 7 men out and 15 still to get. But William Barnes was never careless yet. A watchful batsman he, though skilled to smite, Barnes joined with Lucas in a doubtful fight. Barnes hit a 2. 3 lucky byes were run. 10 more to win, what joy to everyone. All cheered for every run and faces shone. Then Lucas played a ball of Spofford's on. 8 of 10 out, and 75 the score. Over was called. The fieldsmen loitered o'er. They paused in little groups to mutter low the secret hints the bats were not to know. Then, watching Studd, they tautened each in place. Studd, our reserve, acclaimed a second grace. Studd stood at watch by Boyle, the gasworks end. On Boyle and Barnes the minute's issues penned. The ball had come to Boyle, who paused a while to give it handhold in a sawdust pile. Then walked intent, and as he turned to run, saw 20,000 faces blurred to one, and saw ahead a great bat tensely wait the ball he held, the undelivered fate. He ran, he bowled, His length ball took its flight down the drear wicket in uncertain light. It lifted, struck on Barnes's glove, and leapt to Murdoch, watching point, who caught and kept. 9 gone for 75, the last man in. Just 9 more runs to tie and 10 to win. Pete, Yorkshire's bowler, came in Barnes's place, the last man in, with 3 more balls to face. Could he but stand until Boyle's over ended, stand, keeping in, then all might be amended. The other end would bat, and Stud was there. Stud, Cambridge Stud, the bright bat debonair. A prayer to Pete went up from England's sons. Keep steady, Yorkshire, Stud will get the runs. You who throughout the game have done so much, now stand, keep in, put nothing to the touch. Pete took his stand. Boyle bowled his second ball. A tumult of glad shouting broke from all. Pete smote it lustily to leg for 2. The ball returned, and Boyle began anew. 7 to tie, and 8 to win the game. Boyle launched another, subtly, not the same. And half the white-faced watchers, staring tense, bit their umbrella handles in suspense. The third ball came, but like a deedless day, it passed unhit and ceased to be in play. An instant's respite. Only 1 more ball and Stud will play, unless Pete's wicket fall. Boyle took the ball. He turned, he ran, he bowled. All England's watching heart was stricken cold. Pete's whirling bat met nothing in its sweep. The ball put all his wickets in a heap. All out, with Stud untried, our star had set. All England out with 7 runs to get. The crowd sat stunned an instant at the blow, then cheered, and none had heard men cheering so, cheered the great cricket that had won the game. In flood onto the pitch the watchers came, Spofforth and Boyle were lifted shoulder high. Brief, brief the glow even of victory. Man's memory is but a moment green. Chronicle now the actors of the scene, unmentioned yet, as Massey, who had made life-giving runs, and Bannerman to aid, Jones, Giffin, Bonner, Horan, all who shared those deadly hours when disaster stirred. Quickly the crowd dispersed to life's routine of life and death, and wonder what they mean. A thunder muttered and a shower fell as twilight came with star and vesper bell. Over the oval stamped where Spofforth bowled, reviving grass blades lifted from the mould.